Hey everyone, welcome to Cyberview, the last episode of 2023. And today we have a couple of great topics we'll cover with our speakers here today, with co-hosts Frida and Carlos. We'll talk about, as usual, AI, and the two biggest AI topics we're going to talk about is Gemini and Grok. Then we'll talk about breaches that we covered previously as well, and we had some updates on Okta and 23andMe. And also, we'll talk about how to stay secure working remotely, and we'll touch on best destinations to work when you work remotely. So we're witnessing the end of the year AI rush, and Google launches Gemini, AI model that hopes to take down ChatGPT. And then also Elon Musk introduces a new chatbot for X, previously known as Twitter, called Grok. And well, according to Elon Musk, this chatbot is going to have a personality. So that's obviously going to be interesting to see. And both of them already faces controversy around a couple of interesting things. So we'll cover that into a bit more detail. So let's talk about that AI race that intensifies before the end of the year. And it's interesting how pretty much almost every episode we mention Elon Musk in one way or another. So let's come back to that. So Elon Musk introduced Grok, the new chatbot for platform X, previously known as Twitter. So it's actually very interesting to find out what you guys think as well about Grok, about how the strength of Grok, and obviously there are a couple controversies around that. So one of them is that Grok will be instead of relying on fixed data sets compared to other AI tools, and it's actually going to be relying on real data from X, which again, to me, it's a red flag already. I mean, it could be, right? And then the other big controversy, which probably goes in line with Elon Musk's character, I would say, he's trying to put character to AI, which even according to Elon Musk is saying it's prohibited for ChatGPT. That's probably slightly playful from Elon Musk. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Carlos, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have been working with machine learning and AI for quite a long time. As every single chatbot that is out there is as good as the data they feed it. So in this case, we all know that X, or Twitter as we also know it, doesn't have the best type of users. So it, of course, is going to get some sarcastic answers, because that's how the data we have on Twitter is. So it can be a red flag on that side, because also it's extremely political. When you go to X, and you will see a lot of bias everywhere, right, left, center. So Grok could be biased as well. And that's a very big red flag for me, at least. That being said, we need to also understand what is the main goal of either ChatGPT or Gemini or Grok. I mean, because if you are going to use it for work, you don't need it to have a personality. You just want simple, straight answers, and that's it.
You don't want the answers to be sarcastic or in a joking manner, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely not. And that is a concern. That's a real possibility with this situation, right? As you said, Carlos, the platform does have issues with promoting bias and hate speech and polarizing content. We know social media is not necessarily reputable for being factual, right? So that is a great concern. I would say that's perhaps the number one concern. Number two concern I have is security-wise, the manipulation risks of an attacker. Because if you know where the data is coming from now, and this is easily manipulated, this data, you can just do that, I think, it's just going to make your life easier as a hacker, I think.
Frida, don't you think that what Elon Musk is doing, he's trying to walk a very thin line between the governance of AI itself, right? How strict it needs to be. And he's trying to make it slightly more controversial. We'll be open to talk about engage into controversial topics, potentially even spread misinformation if that data feed is coming from X itself, right? So I think previously we talked about WormGPT and ChatGPT, and there's that sort of black and white lines. I think personally seems like Elon Musk is trying to sort of merge a bit of both properly. What do you think, Frida?
Well, it could be a topic just to discuss alone, incorporating emotions into a bot, right? So not only focusing on IQ, but EQ, right? So emotional intelligence. If I were to create such a thing, I don't think I would use X as the source.
Yeah, definitely. Especially because, as we were discussing before, you don't know where your data is ending up. You don't know what the data is coming from as well. So it could be anything. It could be, as you mentioned, hate speech, or it could actually be a reputable source, but you will never know. And that's the main...
Absolutely.
Exactly.
It seems like those safeguards would need to be reduced for X to utilize it efficiently.
Yeah, right on. But what you might know, Carlos, is I think, and I'll go to privacy because you know how obsessed I am with privacy concerns. Using real-time data from social media, I feel you can easily identify the person, right? Because you don't even need their name necessarily. You just need certain points of information to identify them. And that's all there with this. And we've seen that with other AI bots so far, right? There's been a couple of cases where lawyers in particular have attempted to sue, ironically, now that I think about it, have attempted to sue OpenAI because they've been named from articles and other pieces of information.
I think that's even the sort of the main selling point of Grok, what Elon Musk is claiming it to be for Grok to rely on real-time data from X. He's advertising as a unique selling point. It could be argued that could be the pitfall of it itself.
Especially because talking about privacy again, anything that you put there is not yours anymore. It's going to be owned by Grok in this case. So you also need to be very careful what you put there.
Probably, and then just to probably add for me last bit as well, I think it's a huge commercial move as well, right? Because Elon Musk is making Grok available only for Premium Plus subscriptions, which they are struggling to increase at the moment, and is the most expensive subscription they have. And Grok is going to be exclusively available only for Premium Plus subscribers. So they're probably trying to make sure they get more subscribers before the end of the year to boost that revenue probably this year. But it's probably very commercial decision.
That makes a lot of sense.
What about the other massive AI release we having before the end of the year as well with Google and Google's Gemini? So we obviously saw that Gemini is being released and utilized internally as well. We all saw the demo, which again, another controversy that we touch upon shortly. But Gemini, Google's claiming Gemini is going to be the driving force of Google artificial intelligence itself in the background. And Gemini, they're going to have multiple tiers. And obviously the most powerful is going to be Gemini Ultra, which itself, like when it comes to artificial intelligence, now the basic models only rely on text in and text out. And Gemini, especially Ultra, is going to be able to process, it talked about videos, it talked about audio, pictures, which obviously in the demo seems amazing, right? But what we can take away from that?
Everyone is trying to sell their product, Grok, ChatGPT, Gemini. Of course, they will going to put it in the brightest light they can possibly do. So we need to be aware of that. Let's not fall for publicity, and it just when it actually comes more available, we should all go and get our own opinion on them.
This year has been all about AI. We actually seen so much information coming out, all the major players releasing their own artificial intelligence tool of some sort. How do you pick and choose from one and from the other? And especially Gemini claiming they're going to be positioned to compare strongly against ChatGPT and be even stronger. And they released the 32 out of 32 benchmark tests they did. Gemini Ultra came up on top of ChatGPT on 30 out of 32 of those. But personally, after doing some research as well, it seems very difficult to actually find very objective information, which one is stronger, which one is better. So absolutely, Carlos. I think right before we get our hands on it ourselves and compare apples to apples, it'll be very tough to say. Everyone's going to be very biased towards their own artificial intelligence tool, saying it's the strongest, it's the fastest, it's the best.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a large task to take all of these AI tools that already exist that do these things separately and put them into one. But, I believe Google's been around for a while and they can achieve that to a pretty good level. I think where, this might be unique is they're trying to focus on enterprise first products with this. And I've noticed this in, my company since I've incorporated Google into our tools. It has been very helpful so far. So that might be the key difference there. It's not only a personal bot, but now an enterprise-ready product, or they're trying to be.
Let's touch on controversy then. Google's been AI-first company for a good decade now. That's what they claim, and we all know that AI is actually what drives Google's growth as well, strongly. But what about that demo? I don't know if you guys seen it, if you read controversy around it as well, saying that demo was edited, demo was fake, and Google obviously didn't even come out saying that, no, it's real. It so kind of implies that it might have been edited. If you are AI-driven first company such as Google, and if you have a tool that is powerful as Gemini Ultra, they say, which obviously apparently is supposed to be beating ChatGPT, why would you edit the demo?
It's like, for example, when you go to McDonald's, you see all the pictures and they look beautiful and they get your burger and it's a little bit not as in the picture, It's they're trying to do the same thing, I think.
Yeah, and it's totally likely, maybe they aren't as fast as the other products. They aren't as robust or as good, and they are, trying to hide that. They're behind in the race, and they're Google. They're this big name. They were the original, not the original search engine, but they're the search engine that won us over. The majority of people still use Google. So, they're trying to get ahead in this race, probably because they feel it's very important to. However, not making any excuses for them, and this might be irrelevant, I have noticed live demos tend to go very wrong.
Yep. Yeah, I think they
Elon Musk knows that, right?
Yeah, he probably does, right? He has a lot of experience with that.
I think that they learn their mistakes when they're trying to sell this Google Stadia, this video game console.
Yep.
It started failing live and it was super bad. So I'm like, you know what? Let's do a little bit makeup here and there and let's not show the real thing.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it might be a good thing because it seems like Google is creating a huge hype around Gemini, but even they came out publicly saying, well, they try not to rush it also. So maybe that's what they need, because they probably believe that it could beat ChatGPT or could be better, could be the most powerful AI tool in the market, which, knowing Google's background and the type of information they have available, it probably can. Yeah. But it seems they're trying to be very cautious around the capabilities, how strong it can be, how strong it will be. I think that should what they need to determine and obviously release as well.
And I will say, if they're going to use that database, because we all know what it is, right? It's our searches.
Yeah, it's our information.
Exactly. Like, we did this. But the again, privacy concerns there, they absolutely will have to have red teams, which again, red teams are essentially just pen testers who come in and make sure that the security of the systems is as hardened as it can be. They will absolutely need to do that for continuous improvement, especially as we're going to talk about the new information with the 23andMe and Okta breaches.
Let's cover a couple of breaches. We previously talked about two big breaches that happened a few months ago, 23andMe and Okta. So recently, a few days ago, we actually got more information that both of those breaches were actually worse than initially claimed by both companies, unrelated. So we covered that into a bit more detail. How does that happen? And can companies ever restore their trust after breaches as such? So let's talk about the breaches then. It's very interesting, right? Because we touched on those on a couple of previous episodes, talking both about Okta and then 23andMe. And it seems like, to me, those are very closely related, because it seems a lot worse than what both companies are claiming it to be, especially with Okta, right? We saw they actually suffered huge losses in terms of stock prices going down as well. And that was actually in light of what they first said, where the breach affected only a handful of customers. And now they came back saying that actually all users of its customer support system has been affected. That's actually all users. It's, huge. We're talking about millions of users with data, right? What does that mean in terms of the trust? I think the biggest question is the trust of the users, right? How do you gain back the trust of your customers, and obviously make sure that your sort of stakeholders can rely on, shareholders can actually rely on, obviously investment could keep on going up for the company and stock prices going up. But then also for me, it goes into the actual bigger question itself. So, do the companies have a duty of care to be fully transparent? And should companies be held accountable for hiding the severity of breaches? Of course, companies will come out and say, well, we were not aware and we needed to do more research, et cetera, et cetera. But what about if there's a proof, or at least maybe some sort of backlog of information coming out that the severity was actually outlined already for them? They were aware, which I'm obviously, we're not claiming anything, but I'm just saying that there's that possibility that both companies, 23andMe and Okta, for instance, they might have been aware of the severity and they try to underplay it to make sure that the prices don't even plummet, the stock prices don't even plummet further.
Yeah, I think there are two big sides to this, both of them bad. On one side, we could say that perhaps they were not aware, which talks very badly about their cybersecurity practices. How they did all these post-mortem processes, how they tried to fix the problem that was there. And on the other hand, as you mentioned, perhaps they actually knew and they tried to hide it, which is even worse. So both sides are bad. So it's up to them now to come over and say, you know what? I'm either incompetent of what I'm doing with your data, or I'm evil what I'm doing with your data.
Both don't promote confidence.
Yep.
No, it's unfortunate. Yeah, I think that either of the two must be true, right? It would be weird to do the latter at this point, because I feel there was a time, right, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. For instance, Yahoo, I love using that as an example. That was the first breach where I was like, wow, you took 5 years to report this. And no one knew, the whole time. But you can't get away with that anymore. I feel like with the way things that are going with breaches and reporting with the SEC too, I would think you would know as a company that this is eventually going to come out, right? And it further ends up harming your reputation much more, right, than if you were originally honest with the breach, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? If I would say, then yeah, Carlos, to your point, then they didn't know, right? They didn't have a red team or a pen tester that was expert enough to figure out how large the breach is and how this occurred, right?
They're multi-million-dollar companies. They're multi-million-dollar companies. I mean, they could pay for that.
Exactly. Exactly, right? Because smaller companies won't have that. So I work at smaller startups, and I end up being in that role, and that's a risk. And larger companies should have this team, an expert team to look into stuff. So then the question is, do they not have an internal team that's good enough, and they had to hire consultants that are more expert outside, and this is how this occurred?
It's up to them to decide to disclose this or not.
Yeah,
it's so true. Yeah.
And I mean, touching on the other company, 23andMe, actually, Frida, I do have a question for you, because when we initially talked about 23andMe, breach, hack, We talked about credential stuffing, right? How it all originated from that, which we can touch on that again. But the question for me to you, Frida, is initially, obviously, it was thought that was a lot lower scale itself in terms of the breach. And now, obviously, came out that the breach, the credential stuffing, affected 6.9 million users. And the 23andMe, they're still coming out and saying that they do not have indication that there has been a data security incident within their system. And they're still claiming that everything happened because of that, of poor password management. And obviously 6.9 million users got affected through that credential stuffing. So my question is, how is that, possible with a credential stuffing to affect that many users? And how does that work? Is there a possibility that obviously their system hasn't had a security incident, or does that, in terms of the breach of this scale, it would be more likely that there was an incident internally as well?
To say that there's not been any breach, I think is debatable. But what they're claiming is that you're using the same password over and over and over again as a user, right? And particularly with a platform like 23andMe, I can see that happening more often just because of the particular user base that you're targeting rather than Okta, which I want to hit on next, even though you asked about 23andMe specifically. So yes, if you don't have MFA set and you're using the same password over and over again throughout many sites, which a lot of people do, I can see how the 23andMe would claim there'd be no breach. However, Okta is claiming the same thing. That's how they've been hacked. So it's odd that Okta is saying that they're breached and 23andMe is not, right? Because Okta, although they're not claiming it was the same way. It wasn't someone who was reusing passwords. It was someone who was using their personal Chrome profile and had Okta credentials, company passwords saved in their Chrome. And so they were hacked that way. It wasn't through an Okta profile, right? And that's important to know because they say that all users were affected, but you have to look into how it affected your own company. Not everyone has contacted Okta support and been hacked per se. It's usually IT people and cybersecurity people. So that's a huge difference. 23andMe, that's half their user base that's been compromised. So they
are trying to be very careful how they word it, right? They did say they do not have indication, which basically would mean that they have been breached,
but they didn't know it.
They have no indication, so meaning that they are unaware of it, which goes back to Carlos' points as well. Maybe they just trying to claim that they don't know that the breach happened, which again doesn't promote the trust in a company as such.
Exactly, and as we just talked about, these are huge companies. Like if Okta should, first of all, I would expect them to have a super robust red team, but whatever. 23andMe, I would expect the same thing. Even though you're not a technology company per se, you are, right? And this is I think some of the most valuable data from someone that could be stolen. Your health, the amount of questions that they asked that are severely personal and informative is very concerning, especially with the way that AI is going. What if someone uses that database from the breach?
We will need to ask ChatGPT about this. Maybe they will ask you some questions and give you some you know what? Yeah, your dad used to be this or that. Okay.
What Grok might know.
What do you know?
Might even throw in a joke about it.
Grok will start joking about it.
Do you know that you're related to your girlfriend?
Yeah, you're second cousins.
Brave statement for someone who might have diabetes soon.
Yeah, it's a great way to...
That's the wit and personality of Grok, right?
Yeah.
Touching on a lighter but security-related topic as well, why don't we talk about the remote work? And we saw a global remote work index, so research concluded by our friends at NordLayer. And it's an interesting topic. I think nowadays, especially post-COVID and everything else, everyone works remotely a lot more. Even all three of us here now, we're actually sitting from home office, right? So we have a capability to work from home. And of course, in many of the countries in the world now, apart from few selected countries, we are entering a cold season, right? A winter. And obviously that will remote in work index itself. It outlines the best countries from security perspective, for instance, and internet availability and so on. That would be easier to work remotely. So where do we have a countries that we would ideally work remotely from?
Lithuania, so I can be with Nord Security.
Interestingly enough, Frida, that from remote work index itself. So Lithuania ranks in top 3 in terms of cyber safety. So you'd be very secure and probably would be, one of the 3 safest countries according to the index itself to work from. So you'd be very cold, but at least you'd be safe.
I would be cold and secure, whereas in San Diego currently, I am warm and insecure.
Well, still US was also very highly ranked because they take a lot of different ways to measure this. As far as I saw, for example, cybersecurity is one of it, but also infrastructure. You need to have a decent speed in order to be internet speed to be working remotely, and also physical security as well. And on top of that, for example, there's something that you need to also take into account if you're working remotely, touristic attractions, like how touristic this place is. So, for example, Mexico is rated very highly on touristic side of things, but on both infrastructure and security is not that good.
It's great food for thought, right? Because we all travel a lot for work and work remotely as well. And maybe this adds a couple extra points to consider when we actually considering certain remote locations to work from. It's not just the how much would you like to work from there, how warm it gets, how good the weather is. And that goes beyond just how strong the Wi-Fi is, right? It goes into infrastructure availability, security itself. Because probably my destination would be actually probably Vietnam. I would just love to spend a few months in Vietnam, which is beautiful, right? And in my mind, it seems like, Wi-Fi is the most important thing is when you work remotely, but it goes beyond that, as you said, Carlos.
Vietnamese food is amazing.
Yeah, because one thing is having Wi-Fi, which most likely everywhere you can get Wi-Fi. But for example, if this Wi-Fi is being provided by copper line instead of a fiber optic, then it's going to be extremely slow anyway, even if you have Wi-Fi. So you need to also take that into account. And something that also it's very important to have into mind is that cybersecurity, you own that. So you need to use a VPN connection. You need to be aware of your surroundings, that no one is like snooping around you, and you will be fine. But physical security is something that you need to also take into account. Like you are in a coffee, you are writing something, you turn around to get your coffee, turn back, and your laptop is not there anymore. So that's something you also need to be aware of.
Well, interesting enough, the number 1 country, according to the index itself, came out to be Denmark. And I personally love Denmark. I wouldn't mind spending time in Copenhagen, more time in Copenhagen and enjoying the pastries and good coffee there as well, and just working remotely. But I'm not sure if I'd survive the winter there. So, Carlos, what's the top country for you that you would like to work remotely from?
Well, I'm originally from Mexico, but that's not my top 1, to be honest. I would prefer to be working from Bali. That will be very nice. Yeah, I know for a fact that they have good infrastructure. We had some colleagues working from there a couple of months ago. So yeah, we were joining meetings all together and there was no issues on that side. And it's fairly safe and there's a lot of touristic attractions going around. So yeah, I think it's quite a good destination.
Great stuff, Carlos. Well, we all picked our country. So to our watchers and listeners, so next time you want to pick a new country to work remotely from, make sure you go and check out Global Remote Work Index and pick the country that is going to be secure, provide great infrastructure, and also you're going to enjoy the tourist attractions there as well. It might even be Denmark, you never know. So that's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening and watching. And of course, feel free to comment, drop your notes or any questions you might have so we can cover on the next episode. See you then.